Look, truth is, I don't need to be here. I'm not like these other people. I had an accident, okay, and everyone's making a big deal out of nothing.
Is it really nothing?
It's been a bad time recently. You know, I'll admit that. I just need some time to figure it out.
That's exactly what this time is.
No, this is about AA. And stop if you really want to know what I think.
I don't. I know that this program works, and it seems to me you might not have given it a try.
Because there's no point. You know why? Because it's based around God, and I don't believe in God.
God, higher power, a power greater than yourself.
Either way, however you want to put it, higher power, but what you actually mean is God. Right?
That was a clip from A Million Little Pieces, and I'm delighted to be joined by its star and writer, Aaron Taylor-Johnson, and its director and co-writer, Sam Taylor-Johnson. Hello, both.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Can we just start? You're finishing each other's sentences.
Oh, no, we can't do that.
Can we just start by maybe just telling us a little bit about the film and how you came to it?
Well, I read the book when it first came out back, I think, in 2005, and the impact it had on me then didn't really diminish over the years, and I always kind of tracked what was happening with it in terms of film, because when I read it I thought, God, this is going to be an amazing film, because James writes in such a visual way, and it's a powerful story, and it's a powerful story about a man's journey and struggle with addiction, and it also has, you know, as much light to it as there is darkness. And so when the rights then came up a couple of years ago, I, you know, as a filmmaker by now, I jumped on them and said, you know, put my hand up. And I got hold of James and I emailed him and he called me straight back and I said, I'd love to make the movie of your book. And he went, okay. And I went, literally as simple as that. And the whole journey with him has been as simple as that.
I'm quite curious to know, do you remember, did you say, would you consider letting me play James? Or did you say, how would you feel about playing James?
Well, really after Nowhere Boy, we really wanted to find what was the next project for us.
That was 10 years ago.
That was
it was released at this point.
Yeah. So, and like Sam said, you know, this was one that she always wanted to do. It stayed by the bedside table. She'd track every filmmaker that was being offered it. You know, it went through a lot of hands and she kept on raising hers, saying, I'll do it. And it got to the point where the rights were reverted. So we sort of nabbed them and that was it. It was like, right now it's in our creative control to do what Sam set out to do. So that was the beauty in it.
So you asked him.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is different to the way you usually approach work, because I'm right in thinking that you do one on, one off, you alternate work projects.
Yeah, we've done that for the last 8-9 years. Yeah, it's been that beautiful balance of being able to support one another and also we move with the family so that there's always a parent with the kids, and that's how we've wanted to be. And it's been really beautiful. So when this one came around to do it at the same time, I asked my parents to come over and look after the kids whilst we went off to work. So.
Yeah, and we shot it in 20 days, which was kind of wild and crazy and adrenaline fueled, and also really helpful in order to not leave the kids too long.
With something like this, I mean, obviously you shoot it in 20 days, which is a ridiculously short amount of time, but the amount of preparation and thought that goes into it beforehand, you co-wrote it. How did you establish boundaries, as in not bringing your work home with you? I mean, where was the line?
I don't think there is one. It's impossible, because I think, you know, it's all just interspersed together. And especially when we were shooting, because the 20 days being such a tight schedule meant that we would come home, or we were staying in like a local hotel to where we were filming, and we'd get back to the hotel, then we'd have to have meetings, you know, into the night with the cinematographer to plan the next day, because we were also producers and writers, and we'd have to shot list and then meet with the actors about the following day, and, you know, very little sleep and then back and straight back in it. So there was never any separation during that time. And I think, you know, when we were writing it over the 18 months, Aaron slowly becomes the character. And so a lot of James was coming into our lives and becoming a part of it. So there was a constant discussion around the world in which he inhabited and the issues that we were tackling in the movie. And so I don't think there's ever any sort of hard and fast rule of cutting off from the work.
And what did that writing look like? Was it sitting eyeball to eyeball? Is it the case that one of you is good at plot and the other one's good at dialogue?
Well, Sam knew exactly what she wanted to shoot and was very vocal about how she wanted to visually shoot it and how she saw certain scenes. And that was just music to anyone's ears. I think when you have the luxury of having a filmmaker attached to something, and then I just felt like I had to get it down on paper quick. So there really wasn't time to go out to a writer, and which we wanted to right at the beginning. And a few of the great writers that we went to were interested, but tied up for about another year, and we didn't have that time. So it felt like we better just get it down quickly before we forget it, you know. And it turned into a big, long 18 months. In fact, I would have loved longer, but structurally, yeah, it was really interesting.
But Aaron has that patience. He can sit like 8-10 hours and write and write and write. I don't have that patience. I kind of pace around and, you know, I'll come in with some ideas here and there, and then Aaron would then, you know, place them in the correct sort of form and structure, which I don't have that kind of brain. So it was a perfect synergy in the sense that, you know, he could really focus and I could sort of pour out mad ideas.
And given that you've never done it before, where does that come from in you? Have you read books? Have you talked to writers? Is it just something through reading a lot of scripts?
Well, I think through being a part of and reading a lot of scripts, that you definitely get a rhythm for it. I mean, there's that aspect. So you generally have a natural instinct to when you read a good script and when you read a bad script. In fact, you don't get past page 20 when you read a bad script. And that is fundamentally because it's not been structured properly. But then we have a really dear friend, actually, Andy Kevin Walker, who kind of mentored us through the process. And, you know, it became like a real sort of study into that world and broke it down. So that was real special and a unique experience to have.
And would you go to him for notes?
Yeah, you know, there are times when, and we have other friends that are writers and other filmmakers. In fact, it wasn't necessarily needing that. You at some point you get a couple of drafts in, and then you feel like you need someone to bounce off, and you go, does this work? Does this feel right? Or have we lost, you know, the journey for this character or what have you? And there are little fundamental sort of techniques and things to do for that. So that was kind of fun. I really liked that.
And I've heard you in interviews talk about when you read this book years ago, even then before you were a filmmaker, you could see it filmically in your head, and there are some lovely visual moments in the film. Have any of the things that you saw back then when you first read it made it into the film?
It's hard to remember what I was thinking when I read it in terms of ideas back then, but I think because James writes in a way where you're so inside his head and there's so many sort of visual elements. And he said to me, create art. He said he wrote it in the spirit of art, go create art. And the creative freedom that gave me to then, you know, scenes where he talks about, for example, walking into the rehab facility and the walls closing in and the anxiety. And so that really sort of had my mind thinking about how can we get across that visually. You know, he's written it so beautifully, but visually. And so, you know, we created this corridor that he walks through, and, you know, the walls start sort of bleeding excrement, you know, and it starts flooding, and he starts sort of dancing in it because it becomes comfortable. It's like, oh, I know, you know, I understand being in the dirt and the rough, and I'm comfortable in this place. And then that's how he sort of enters rehab, through the sort of anxiety and then creating a sort of headspace of comfort and familiarity through something else.
How common is it when you're adapting an existing book for the author to turn around and say, you're an artist, go away and make art?
In my experience, not common. And it was music to my ears. I mean, James, you know, he said to me, you know, I really don't need to be involved, or I can be. I'll read things or I won't. It's really however much you need me or don't need me. And so it was great because he'd be at the end of the phone and you know, Aaron could call him up and ask him things. You know, you could have a sense of that he was always available, and he would tell us stories or talk about different things that he went through.
Yeah, and then, you know, you could tap into anything. And we spent 18 months writing it, and in that time we went to the treatment center and went on a road trip, and I spent time with his brother and his friends, and who used to go and visit him quite often in the facility. So there was a lot to tap into, even though some of those things didn't even make it in, but you got a feel of authenticity there.
Why was it important to visit that treatment centre that he
describes in the book? Because it's a huge character of the book. I mean, it's like you need to soak in the environment. You need to understand it's not as clinical as you might first thought, and then and also the geography of it. You know, he goes from the first couple of weeks in a medical unit, and then he goes on to the actual unit and this. You know, I needed to understand the geography of that in order to have an understanding of writing it. You know.
When the book came out, there was this controversy a short while afterwards, which seems very much of its time. I think now we just accept that memoir writing, of course, you remember anything to some extent, it's fiction. But at the time, it was this this huge sort of brouhaha. Was that a factor at all? The thing you did, I thought, was really classy. You used a Mark Twain quote just at the beginning of the film. How long had you had that quote knocking about?
The quote at the beginning is, "I've lived through some terrible things in my life, some of which have happened." But the controversy was the controversy, and we did have discussions about how should we address it, and should we have the Oprah interview at the end, or should we have any transcripts at the beginning? And we decided that actually it was the book that completely captured my imagination, and the controversy was there. People were aware of it. It can be read about, Googled, all of those things. But for me, it was really what the book meant to me when I read it, and how visually I could tell that story. And, you know, the sort of divining rod or the guiding star, whatever, was really James, and the fact that he had been on this journey, and we'd met with his counselors, and we'd spent time with people who supported him through that, and that 26 years later he's still sober, and, you know, he's been through everything, you know, through the book, as well as public shaming a hell of a lot, but still, you know, remains very dignified and still sober.
I want to talk about some of the supporting cast. Juliette Lewis is in there as a counsellor, and Billy Bob Thornton just lights up the screen every
so
time
great.
he comes on as one of the fellow people in recovery. As you were writing it, did you have a wish list, and was Billy Bob Thornton at the top of it, or was it a eureka moment at some later stage?
I think a bit of both. It was hard. He was actually a really hard piece to when we were writing it, we visualized the actors that we wanted to play, and we sort of started to post them up on the wall so we could kind of look at their face. But, you know, it was kind of interesting to do like that. And luckily, pretty much everybody who was up on the board, we got in the movie. And Billy Bob, it was a hard character to cast, but when we sort of finally, it was that a eureka moment. And then it was like, Billy Bob, but do we feel like, would he be interested in doing it? You know, is there that moment where you kind of get really nervous and anxious that you're like, he's the exact last ingredient, if we can get
Is it difficult to ask?
Well, it's just nerve-wracking because we wrote the script, so, you know, you're kind of going, what do you think of this? And would you be involved? And, you know, I was amazed by how everybody came back super quick, and with an answer was yes. And we go, we don't have any money. And they went, this is not a problem, we're in. And it was like, this is amazing. This is like our dream coming true, that everyone who we asked came back and said yes.
And everyone really sort of said, this one's for the soul. We'll do the next one for the money, but this one's for the soul. And, you know, Billy Bob came on set and was like, really? This is the first time I've had to share a trailer with two other people. But what it did was, you know, create a really tight community to create this film. And having that level of cast of Juliette Lewis and Billy Bob Thornton, Charlie Hunt, and,
Giovanni
Ribisi, it just sort of made everything much tighter and possible, really.
Yeah.
So your last project together was 2009. Should we expect something else in 2029?
No, I'm hoping for something a bit sooner than that, because I had an awareness, you know, over the years of, I want to do something and I want us to collaborate and do something together. But it was difficult. We had much younger kids then, and now they're just a little bit bigger, and it feels more possible for us both to work at the same time.
And what's your next thing that you're going to be doing?
I don't know yet. I really don't know. And it's interesting also, you know, after every film, I always feel like I'm at ground zero straight afterwards, and I have to kind of go out there and push and bang on the doors again and get on the lists. And it's a non-stop battle to be on the list for good movies. So, yeah.
And Aaron, Christopher Nolan, Tenet?
That's right.
We heard Robert Pattinson say that he had to go into a locked room and read the script, and he wasn't allowed to take it out. Have you had that experience too?
Yep.
But you're going to tell me all about it now, of course. Yeah, right. Well, thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you. Thanks for having us on.
Thank you so much. Thank you.